Right, here we go, guys. Dinosaur Boy Chapter 7, Sylvie. On Monday, I didn't want to go to school any more than I had the previous Friday. But my mom marched me through my morning routine with such efficiency that I ended up being the first person to arrive in my classroom. The only upside to this was that I was able to squeeze into my desk before anybody else got there to witness my horrid awkwardness. A few minutes before the bell, I heard kids start to arrive and fill up the desks behind me. I sat facing the front of the room, determined not to turn around or move, kind of like in Jurassic Park, where the T-Rex could only see you if you moved. Only here the roles were kind of reversed. I was concentrating so hard on being invisible that it took me a while to notice that the desk next to mine, which had sat unoccupied for the past week, was no longer empty. Someone was sitting in Parker's old seat. I tried to catch a glimpse of the newcomer without turning my head, but all I could see out of the corner of my eye was an oversized sweatshirt the color of a traffic cone. The hood was pulled up, and the owner's face was buried too deep inside for me to be able to catch more than a glimpse. The only thing sticking out was the tip of a nose. It was red, like mine got when I forgot to put on sunscreen at the lake. The newcomer was also wearing white shoes, really bright white shoes. Sneakers, without a single scuff. They must have been new. Class, Miss Filch clapped her hands to get our attention. We have a new student with us. I'd like you all to meet, why don't you take off your hood, dear? No, came a determined voice from underneath the sweatshirt. Miss Filch looked momentarily startled, but then her face hardened. I'm sorry, but I don't allow hats in the classroom. I'm not wearing a hat, the figure inside the sweatshirt pointed out. I thought it sounded like a girl's voice, but it was hard to be sure. I'm wearing a hood, and I like it. It's a very lovely color, Miss Filch said hesitantly, blinking at the neon. But a hood is the same thing as a hat, and I must insist that you take it off. The girl, I was slightly more sure it was a girl now, sighed. Her bony shoulders gave a shrug from underneath the roomy sweatshirt, and she threw the hood back off her head. It was a girl. Her hair was dark brown and very curly. Half of it was stuck in her hood, and she had to pull hard to get it out. It stuck out in all directions. After that, kind of like the arms of an octopus. The skins on her hands and face were light brown, except for the very tip of her nose, which, as I already mentioned, was red, also a little bit peely. She was a perfectly ordinary girl. I don't know why I was disappointed. I don't know what I had been expecting. I would wear a hood, too, Cece's voice floated up from the back of the room, if I had hair like that. Yikes. Muffled giggles exploded around the room, but Miss Filch didn't appear to notice. There now, isn't that better? She said, beaming down at the new girl. Class, this is Sylvia Juarez. Sylvia? Sylvie, the girl corrected Miss Filch. My name is Sylvie. Sylvie just moved here from New Mexico. What do you think of Portland so far, Sylvie? Sylvie glanced over at me. I expected her to look embarrassed because of Miss Filch's question and Cece's snarky comment. I certainly would have been, but instead she just kind of looked bored. She grinned slightly and rolled her eyes at me, as though the two of us were sharing some private joke, as if she wanted to say, Isn't this stupid? Sylvie turned back to our teacher. It rains here a lot, she answered. Oh, well, you'll get used to it, Miss Filch assured her, smiling kindly before she turned back to the front of the room. If everyone will open their books to page 24, we will continue our discussion of the first American colonies. Sylvie scrunched down in her seat and pulled her hood back up so that it was halfway over her head. Probably not enough so that Miss Filch would tell her to take it off again, but enough to hide at least most of her hair. She caught me watching her and rolled her eyes again. It was a friendly eye roll, just like the one before. I smiled in response. I couldn't help it. She had one of those faces you just wanted to smile at. But there was still something weird about her. I thought about it the whole time Miss Filch droned on about Jamestown. It wasn't Sylvie's crazy hair, or even her neon orange sweatshirt. I didn't care that she was from New Mexico, or that she had a sunburned nose. It was around the time that Miss Filch started describing the starving time in gruesome detail that I figured it out. Sylvie definitely looked right at me, at least twice, and both times she hadn't seemed the least bit surprised to find that she was sitting next to a boy who was part dinosaur. Yeah, there was definitely something weird about the new girl. For the second half of last year, at lunchtime, Elliot and I had sat at the long table by the door, along with Mary and a few other kids from our class. But now that I was part dinosaur, it was just the two of us, and we had to move to the table closest to the bathroom. If we were demoted any further, we'd probably have to sit in the bathroom. Elliot still probably could have sat at the table by the door if he'd wanted to. Actually, I'm pretty sure he did want to. He only sat with me out of loyalty, the same way I'd sat with him for the first half of last year, when nobody else would sit near Gigantor. It was nice of him, but I could tell that remaining friends with me was making him pretty miserable. "It's only the second week," he said, smiling bravely as he unwrapped his sandwich. "Everyone will get over it. You'll see. Something else will come along." "Like what?" I said, prying the lid off the jumbo-sized mixing bowl my mom had packed into my salad. "Something weirder than me." "I doubt it." Elliot's gaze flicked down to my tail, which had started twitching happily at the smell of my fresh greens. The tennis balls at the ends of my spikes made cheerful bong, bong sounds against the floor with every twitch. Elliot shook his head sadly. I shoved a giant forkful of lettuce into my mouth. I looked up just in time to be half blinded by a patch of neon orange. Sylvie stood uncertainly in front of our table. She was holding a large, insulated lunch sack. "Can I sit?" she asked, when neither Elliot nor I said anything. I nodded, my mouth still full. Elliot cleared his throat. "Sure," he said. Under his breath, he mumbled, "Why not? It can't get any worse." Sylvie either didn't hear or didn't mind, because she smiled and set down her sack. Her hood was back up, and when she went to sit down, it fell forward so that it was almost impossible to see her face. She unzipped her sack and busied herself while setting out her lunch. First, she removed a pink, disc-shaped tortilla warmer. Next came a tin-foil pie plate with a white lid. Sylvie peeled back the lid to reveal a pile of peppers, onions, and strips of chicken. They were so hot I could see the steam rising from them. Then she took out small containers of salsa, cheese, and sour cream. Last was a medium-sized container of rice. Yum, this is making me hungry. "What is all of that?" he asked. Sylvie surveyed the feast, wrinkled her peeling nose, and then sat back in the chair without touching any of it. "Chicken fajitas," she answered, sounding bored. "For lunch?" I asked. It reminded me of the takeout my dad would sometimes pick up on his way home from work. But I would never get to take something so fancy to school with me, not even back when I ate things like fajitas. Elliot was looking down at his half-eaten sandwich with chagrin. "My mom owns a restaurant," Sylvie explains. "These are just leftovers from the kitchen. Do you guys want any? We could trade." I shook my head and pointed to my salad. "I'm good," I said, "but thanks." "I'll trade," Elliot exclaimed. "What have you got?" Sylvie leaned over to examine his lunch. Other than the half-eaten sandwich, which I knew from experience was probably filled with sprouts and some sort of meat substitute, Ellie had only some carrots, a container of hummus, and a cup of chocolate pudding. "Not much," he admitted. "My mom is a health nut." Sylvie pointed to the pudding. "I'll trade you for that." "Okay," Elliot said, and quickly handed over the cup. Sylvie shoved the fajita makings across the table at him. "All of it?" Elliot said, and quickly handed over the cup. "Okay." Sylvie shoved all of it?" Elliot asked uncertainly. Sylvie nodded and opened the pudding. "I'm sick of Mexican food," she explained. I found this kind of funny, considering that she probably was Mexican. At least, I thought she might be. It was hard to tell, considering most of her was hidden under the giant sweatshirt. Sylvie took a bite of the pudding and immediately made a face. "It's soy," Elliot explained. "My mom made it herself." He paused, a half-made fajita in one hand, probably worried that Sylvie might be reconsidering their trade. But Sylvie set the pudding down, reached into the front pocket of her sweatshirt, and pulled out a handful of candy. She deposited it on my table and studied the pile carefully, finally selecting a banana Laffy Taffy. "Ooh, yeah." She unwrapped the taffy, popped it into her mouth, and turned to me. "So," she said, "you're part dinosaur. What's that like?" "Pretty crappy," I admitted. Sort of a weird question, but I didn't mind. It was nice that somebody was finally asking me, right to my face, instead of wondering behind my back. Sylvie seemed surprised by my answer. "Really? I think it's kind of cool." I snorted. "You don't have to live with it." Sylvie nodded, her face serious, as she unwrapped a second Laffy Taffy. This one was pink, and smelled like strawberry to my hypersensitive dino nose. "That's true," she said. "I hadn't thought of it like that." Oh my God, Elliot broke in, taking a second bite of an overloaded fajita and causing sour cream to squirt out of the opposite end. He rolled his eyes in happiness. He chewed, swallowed, and then added, "This is ridiculous. Your mom's restaurant must be awesome. Where is it? I'm going to eat there every day from now on." "The one in Portland isn't open yet," Sylvie told him with a slight smile. "Not until a week. But she and my dad own a couple of other ones, and they all do pretty well." "Back in New Mexico?" I guessed, remembering Miss Filch's introduction. "There, and a couple of other places," Sylvie mumbled, rooting through her pile of candy. "Your dad?" Elliot prompted her. When Sylvie didn't respond, he added, "Sorry you made it sound like it was just your mom who owned the restaurant." "My parents are separated," Sylvie said, and her slight smile faded. "That's why my mom and I moved to Portland, but I'm probably not going to be here very long. I'm really supposed to be living with my dad. He's on a business trip right now, but he's coming to take me home with him as soon as he gets back." "Won't your mom mind?" I asked her. Sylvie shrugged. She only cares about the restaurant. "Does your dad live around here?" Elliot asked. Sylvie considered this. "He lives a little bit outside of Portland," she answered finally. Elliot nodded wisely. "You'll probably have to change schools then when you go to live with him. I mean, that sucks." "Yeah," Sylvie agreed. There was an uncomfortable silence after that, so I filled it with the only thing that came to mind. "I used to like Mexican food," I said, feeling a little bit sorry for myself. "But ever since this," I gestured to my plates, "all I really wanted to eat is salad and fruit. Lots of fruit." "Stegosaurus was an herbivore," Elliot explained, presumably for Sylvie's benefit. "So you haven't always been part dinosaur?" she asked me. Without waiting for an answer, she picked up a pixie stick, tipped her head back, and dumped the entire contents in her mouth. "Oh, no, Sawyer was totally normal last year," Elliot answered, and then smiled in apology. "Sorry, man, you're still normal. I just mean—" "No, he's not," Sylvie interrupted through a mouthful of sugar. I looked over at her, feeling surprised and hurt. So she did think it was weird. I guess I couldn't really blame her. Sylvie shrugged unapologetically. "Well, you're not normal, I mean. My dad always says that no one is normal. Not once you get to know them." She smiled at me then, and there were sugar crystals stuck in her teeth. "I guess you're right," I said, feeling a little bit less hurt than I had a moment ago. "But most people can hide their weirdness a little better than I can." "Yeah, that's true." Sylvie opened a tiny package of Twizzlers. She pulled them apart one by one and dangled them into her mouth like worms. Elliot looked over at me. He had part of a red pepper dangling from his bottom lip, and his eyes were very clearly saying, "Is this girl for real?" I shrugged. Whether she was for real or not, Sylvia definitely found her table, the one closest to the bathroom, with us. I love that. All right, you guys, have a great rest of your day, and we'll read Chapter 8 tomorrow, Ring Toss.